There's a moment, before anything changes on the outside, when something shifts within you. You don't always recognize it at first. It's subtle, it's quiet, it's not loud like a text or a knock on the door. It's not dramatic like a sudden return or grand apology. No, it starts inside. It's a calm certainty, a whisper of truth in your gut, a deep breath where you used to feel panic, and before anything or anyone reappears in your life. You feel it first inside. That moment is powerful because it means you've let go, not in a way that's cold or dismissive, but in a way that's sacred. You've stopped waiting, stopped begging, stopped watching the door. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started honoring yourself. That's where real transformation happens. That's when life, energy, people, all begin to respond to your new frequency. You feel lighter without needing closure, and for the first time it feels real. It's not forced. It's not a performance. It's not pretending you're okay while secretly waiting for a message or an apology. No, this lightness is different. It comes from the deep, quiet place inside where you finally release the grip on what could have been. You no longer wake up every day hoping they'll say the right thing or do the right thing to fix what broke. You're no longer rehearsing imaginary conversations or waiting for a knock that never comes. Instead, you're breathing again, fully, slowly, freely. This is the shift that happens when you realize closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you. For so long, you thought if you could just get one more answer, one more conversation, it would all make sense. But you've started to see that the lack of closure was never your burden to carry. Their silence. Their leaving, their avoidance, it wasn't about you. It was about them. And you've stopped trying to make someone's inability to show up into a reflection of your value. That clarity alone is freedom. You begin to feel weight lifting off your shoulders, not because the pain is erased, but because you're no longer holding it like it's your job to fix it. You're no longer trying to rearrange the past into something prettier. You've stopped blaming yourself for someone else's distance, and most importantly, you've stopped making their absence mean something about your worth. That's the real turning point. That's where the heaviness dissolves, not because the story changed, but because your perspective did. You find yourself walking through your day with more ease. The anxiety that used to cling to your chest has softened. The obsessive need to analyze every word, every moment, every silence, it's fading. And in its place, there's stillness, there's presence, there's this quiet truth that maybe, just maybe, it was never your responsibility to hold it all together. Maybe you were never supposed to carry that much. And now you don't. You're putting it down piece by piece, breath by breath. The beauty of this kind of lightness is that it doesn't come with an announcement. You don't need to tell the world you've moved on. You don't need to prove it on social media. You don't need to act unbothered. You simply are, because you've finally let go of the narrative that healing only happens when someone else cooperates. You've taken back the pen. You've rewritten the ending. You've chosen peace over perfection, freedom over fantasy, and yourself over waiting. And in doing that, you've become lighter, not because the past disappeared, but because your soul no longer has to carry it. You feel peace in the silence, and that's how you know something in you has shifted at the core. Where there was once anxiety, now there's acceptance. Where silence used to feel like punishment, now it feels like space, sacred space. You used to fill that silence with fear, with questions like, why aren't they reaching out? Or did I do something wrong? You used to check your phone constantly, scroll through old messages, hold your breath when a notification popped up. That silence used to scream, but now it just breathes, and so do you. The transformation isn't loud, but it's profound, because peace in silence doesn't come from forgetting someone. It comes from remembering yourself. You start to realize that if someone can disappear without explanation, their silence says more than their words ever could. And you stop needing a reply to feel complete. You're no longer waiting for someone to validate your pain or explain their absence. You've stopped searching for healing in their response. You've found it in your own stillness. You begin to reclaim your emotional landscape. Mornings that once felt heavy now feel open. Nights that used to echo with what-ifs now bring quiet reflection. You're no longer controlled by the anticipation of someone else's next move. That's the power of this peace. It's not about detachment. It's about devotion to your own well-being. You're not ignoring your feelings, you're respecting them. And you've stopped allowing someone's silence to become your suffering. This peace also shows up in your energy. You're not chasing closure in conversations that never lead anywhere. You're not asking questions you already know the answers to. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that decision allows you to walk through life with a grounded calmness that others can feel. It's in your tone. It's in your posture. It's in the way you no longer react to the things that used to unravel you. What's even more powerful is that this silence no longer creates distance between you and your future. It creates space, space for healing, space for clarity, space for new energy to enter, space for you to connect more deeply with yourself. You begin to hear your own voice more clearly. Your intuition gets louder. You start feeling guided, not by someone else's approval, but by your own inner compass. And from that place, you no longer fear silence. You respect it, you use it, you grow in it. Peace and silence is a sign that your healing is no longer dependent on external noise. It's not about them talking again. It's about you no longer needing the conversation to feel whole. You've stepped into a new vibration, one where stillness isn't emptiness. It's a signal that you've evolved, that you've let go, and that you're now moving in alignment with something far greater, your own inner peace. You feel empowered to focus on yourself, and it's not just a motivational phrase anymore, it's a lifestyle. After pouring so much energy into trying to understand someone else, trying to be enough, to fix things, to hold something together that was never yours to carry alone, something within you finally says no more, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of clarity, out of a calm, unwavering realization that you have a life to build, a vision to chase, and a soul that needs your own attention more than anyone else's. There's a shift that happens when you stop revolving around someone else's distance or decisions. That shift is where you reclaim all the pieces of yourself that you gave away hoping they'd stay. You begin to take that energy back, not with resentment, but with reverence. You realize how sacred your energy is, how powerful your focus is, and you start directing it toward things that fill you, heal you, grow you. The gym becomes your release. Your career becomes your canvas. Your journal becomes a sacred space to explore who you are outside of someone else's shadow. This empowerment doesn't come from ego, it comes from alignment. You stop asking, what are they thinking, and start asking, what am I creating? You stop watching the door and start building your future. You remember passions you'd set aside, you try new things, you find joy in places you never looked before. You begin waking up for you, not to get a message, not to check their profile, not to feel wanted, but to live, to expand, to rise. What's even more powerful is that you begin to feel pride in your own presence. You look in the mirror and see strength where you once saw sadness. You celebrate small wins that once would have gone unnoticed. You start measuring your growth not by whether they come back, but by how fully you're showing up for yourself. And that shift, that fierce, beautiful redirection of energy is magnetic because you're no longer moving from emptiness. You're overflowing. People can feel this change. You radiate differently when your love is no longer leaking towards something uncertain. When you stop waiting to be prioritized and start prioritizing your own life, everything shifts. Not because you're trying to prove a point, but because you're finally honoring your purpose. You're not sitting on the sidelines anymore, waiting for someone else to decide your worth. You've taken the pen back. You're writing your own story, and that empowerment, it builds momentum. Every day you choose yourself, your peace, your goals. You build resilience. You become unstoppable not because everything's easy, but because you finally remember who you are when you're not trying to be everything to someone else. You feel empowered to focus on yourself, and from that space, the love, clarity, and alignment you once searched for in others begins to find its way back to you, not because you waited, but because you became. You begin to feel gratitude for what it taught you. Yes, even the pain, even the confusion, even the silence that once tore you apart. At first, that kind of gratitude feels impossible. How could you ever be thankful for the heartbreak, for the endless overthinking, for the nights you cried yourself to sleep? But the moment you zoom out and see who you're becoming through it all, something clicks. You stop viewing it as a failure or punishment. You begin to see it as a teacher, a painful one, yes, but a teacher nonetheless. When you shift from "why did this happen to me?" to what did this wake up in me, you unlock a new level of healing. You start to notice how the experience stripped away illusions, how it forced you to face parts of yourself that were too comfortable staying small. You realize that you learned how to speak up because they silenced you. You learned how to love yourself because they didn't know how. You found your boundaries because someone kept crossing them, and suddenly you're not angry, you're aware, deeply aware, and that awareness becomes the birthplace of transformation. There's a strange kind of power that comes when you look back without bitterness. You remember the moments you felt weak, and you now realize they were moments of strength in disguise. You revisit the memories not to relive the pain, but to reclaim your growth. You stop romanticizing what you lost and start appreciating what you gained: resilience, clarity, and an unshakable connection with your own worth. You see it all now: the red flags, the self-betrayal, the unmet needs, not to judge yourself, but to forgive yourself. That's the real victory. Gratitude doesn't mean you wish it all happened again. It means you've stopped wishing it never did. You understand that without that storm, you wouldn't be standing in the strength you have today. Without that ending, you wouldn't have found your new beginning. Without the silence, you wouldn't have heard your own voice rise again. And that's what healing looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of perspective. When you feel grateful for what it taught you, the entire narrative changes. You no longer need revenge or validation. You don't need them to apologize or return. You don't even need closure, because you've created meaning from the mess. You've turned your pain into wisdom, and that wisdom can't be taken. It can't be erased. It lives in your decisions, your standards, your peace. That's what makes the journey worth it. Not that you didn't hurt, but that you learned. And because you learned, you rose. You feel your boundaries growing stronger, and it no longer feels like you're building walls. It feels like you're building respect, not just from others, but for yourself. You stop letting your emotions lead you into situations that drain you. You stop making excuses for inconsistent behavior. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. Suddenly, your standard shifts, not because you're trying to protect yourself out of fear, but because you've finally remembered your value, and that value, it doesn't need to be explained, defended, or compromised. It just needs to be honored. You start saying no without guilt. You stop over-explaining your decisions to people who don't respect your time or your presence. You realize that if someone's love costs you your peace, it's too expensive. What once felt like loyalty now looks like self-betrayal, and you refuse to keep repeating patterns that left you emotionally bankrupt. This isn't a temporary stance. It's a fundamental shift in your identity. You are no longer emotionally available for chaos, for confusion, for connections that come with conditions. As your boundaries grow, so does your clarity. You begin to spot red flags before they become patterns. You listen to your intuition instead of silencing it. You no longer feel responsible for fixing broken behavior or carrying the emotional weight of other people's decisions. You've stopped waiting for someone to change. You're not bitter, you're just awake, and that awareness lets you walk away not out of anger, but out of alignment. These new boundaries also become the filter through which you protect your energy. You're selective with your time, intentional with your conversations, and unapologetic about your needs. You're not building barriers. You're building bridges to better relationships, stronger connections, and healthier outcomes. The version of you that once feared being too much now realizes that being too much for the wrong people only meant you weren't with the right ones, and that realization, it sets you free. When your boundaries are strong, your self-worth becomes non-negotiable. You stop performing for love, you stop explaining your standards, you stop watering yourself down to make others comfortable. The right people will rise to meet you, the wrong ones will fall away, and you let them. Not from a place of spite, but from a place of peace, because your boundary isn't rejection, it's protection. It's a declaration that says, I know what I bring, and I will no longer accept less than I deserve. That strength is quiet. It's steady, and it's exactly what sets the foundation for everything healthy, whole, and real to come into your life. You no longer wait, you choose, and in that single powerful decision, everything changes. You're no longer sitting on the edge of your life, wondering if someone will come back, hoping the story will pick up where it left off. You've stopped refreshing old conversations and replaying what ifs in your mind. Because you finally understood that waiting is not a love language. It's a form of self-abandonment, and you're done with that. You've outgrown the version of yourself who lived in limbo. Now you live in alignment. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about understanding that your time, your heart, your energy, they're sacred. You don't waste them anymore hoping someone else will recognize what you've always known, that you're worth showing up for. And so, instead of waiting to be chosen, you choose yourself. You stop asking, will they ever come back? And start asking, what am I building today? The energy you once gave to uncertainty is now fueling your purpose, your growth, your joy. In this new space, indecision has no place. You know how much it cost you to wait, how it drained your spirit, blurred your vision, and delayed your healing. So now you move forward with clarity. You make peace with unanswered questions. You stop chasing closure. You no longer look for signs or chase synchronicities to validate your worth. You realize the most powerful sign you've been waiting for is the one inside of you, the one that says, I'm ready to move forward. And that forward motion doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from breakthrough. You begin to rebuild your life with intention. You reclaim the joy that was buried beneath waiting. You invest in yourself, not to prove anything to anyone, but because you finally believe you're worth every ounce of that energy. Your life starts to fill with movement, momentum, and meaning. You're no longer pausing your evolution for the potential of someone else's return. You're fully present in your own becoming. The moment you stop waiting and start choosing, your entire vibration shifts. You're no longer available for half love, mixed signals, or emotional breadcrumbs. You've raised your standards, not out of ego, but out of experience. You've learned that love isn't about staying stuck, it's about growing free. And now the only thing you're waiting for is the next version of yourself, the one you're actively creating moment by moment, choice by choice. That's not giving up, that's rising up, and from that place of deep personal power, everything that's meant for you will find its way. Not because you waited, but because you chose. There is a shift that occurs deep within, a moment when you decide you're no longer available for pain disguised as love, for confusion packaged as connection, or for inconsistency masquerading as affection. And that moment, that's when everything changes. You stop moving from desperation and start moving from power. You no longer look outward for validation, attention, or proof that you are worthy. You turn inward. And the truth is, the moment you make that inner shift, your outer world begins to align. That magnetic pull you were chasing, you become it. You begin to operate from a place of self-respect so powerful that it naturally commands a response from the world. Your energy starts to say what your words no longer need to. You're not waiting, you're not hoping, you're not attached to who stays or who returns. You are focused, centered, whole, and from that space, the people who once overlooked you start to feel your absence. The dynamic changes, not because you said anything, but because you became someone different, someone unshakable. When you lead with healing, everything reacts to that energy. The moment you stop chasing and start becoming, the very thing you thought you lost starts to chase you. But by then, you're not even concerned with who's watching. You're building, you're growing, you're nurturing a life that reflects your value, and the irony, that's when everything begins to circle back, because true power doesn't beg. It doesn't plead, it simply is, and when you are rooted in that kind of self-assurance, the people who once ran from your light now want to stand in its glow. The most important return isn't from someone else, it's from you. You come back to your voice, you come back to your boundaries, you come back to your worth. You stop trying to edit yourself to be accepted, and you start expressing yourself to be aligned. You no longer care about proving your value, you live it. And that's what makes you magnetic, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer, not because you're bitter, but because you're better, better at choosing yourself, better at protecting your peace, better at loving from fullness instead of lack. So if you're asking when will they come back, know this. The moment you stop asking that question and start living your own answers, that's when things shift. That's when life begins to reflect your inner transformation. That's when doors open, people return, energy moves, not because you forced it, but because you became so rooted in who you are, the world had no choice but to respond. And whether someone comes back or not no longer defines your story, because you do, and that's the moment. Everything comes back fast. Thank you so much for watching and for sharing this moment with me. Your time, your presence, and your energy truly matter, and I honor that. If today's message sparked something inside you, if it reminded you of your power, your worth, or your potential to rise no matter what you've been through, then know this: that shift wasn't accidental. You were meant to hear this. You were meant to realign with the version of yourself that no longer waits to be chosen, but chooses herself boldly and without apology. Remember, the moment you change, everything around you begins to respond. That's not magic. That's alignment. Keep choosing you, keep growing, and never forget, you are not chasing anything. You are becoming everything. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your energy, and always, always walk in your truth. Thank you, and goodbye for now.